The USMNT's World Cup qualifying roster for the October window is set to drop next week, and in this video, I'm talking about what I think Gregg Berhalter is going to do with this roster and what I would do with this roster. Get ready for it. What up, guys? I'm Pete Douthit, host of the 11 Yanks show, where we discuss all things USMNT. Most of you already know me already, so smash that like button for me. If you're new here, we have 2, sometimes 3 videos a week talking about all things in the American soccer landscape. Smash that subscribe button so you don't miss any videos. Let's dig into it. Okay, so over the course of the summer, Gregg won 2 trophies, Gold Cup and Nations League, and that bought him a little bit of goodwill and benefit of the doubt going into the September qualifying window. In my opinion, Gregg has lost all of that goodwill with both his roster selections, the team performances, and the results over the course of September qualifying. And I had concerns way back during the summer. Although we were winning games, the performances were not telling me that that was something that was sustainable over the long term, and so I had concerns. That being said, when a coach wins trophies, they earn the benefit of the doubt. That's just how sports work. So I was willing to give Gregg a little bit of benefit of the doubt going into the September qualifying window and maybe not be too critical of his decisions. That's not going to be the case here. I think that every move Gregg makes from now on needs to be scrutinized heavily and looked at through a microscope because he has not done well in that first window. 5 out of 9 points is not good. Anybody who's telling you otherwise doesn't know what they're talking about, or they're full of it, guys. Not only were the results bad, the performances were bad. The team looked tactically clueless. There was a lack of cohesion. There was a lack of team spirit. We had no idea how we were going to create, and really only a poor performance in the second half against Honduras, a team that kind of fell apart and made some bizarre tactical substitutions, helped us to get the win. So we're going to look at this through a microscope, guys, and I'm going to give you what I think Gregg will do and then what I will do, and then in the comments afterwards, I want you to tell me what you would do. Okay, so there are some points to ponder here that are important. The first one is that our last roster was just way too small. I don't think that's, revolutionary information to anybody. We had 26. Before people even got together, we lost Tim Weah and Cristian Pulisic had COVID, so really it was 24, which is basically a very small roster for 3 games in a week. For whatever reason, Gregg didn't even try to replace anybody. All that to say, the roster was ridiculously small, and so we're going to lean to the other side of making it bigger. I do think that Gregg will make it bigger. I'm going to probably make it bigger than Gregg would, and we'll talk about that. Depth is not the only purpose of a large roster. We're not just trying to qualify for the World Cup here, right? We're trying to prepare the team to have the best possible performance at the World Cup, right? Because we do have enough quality to qualify. But when we get there, we need a team that has the best possible chance of being as successful as possible. And so what that means is sometimes players that you bring in, maybe they're not ready now, or maybe they're not going to play a ton of minutes now in these qualifying, but you bring them in because you want them to be a part of the roster. You want them to build cohesion and camaraderie with their teammates. You want them to get used to how, the team works, the training sessions, the atmosphere, get them ready for CONCACAF, right? A lot of these young players will have 3 or 4 more CONCACAF qualifying campaigns in them, right? So there's a lot of reasons to bring players in that aren't just like, we might need him to play. Of course, we may need him to play, but that's not the only consideration. Players based in England will, as of right now, not be able to travel to the Panama game. That is because Panama is still listed as a red country, and so what'll happen is there are 3 games. We have Jamaica at home, and then Panama away, and then Costa Rica at home again. So you want to bring an extra large roster because at least 5 or 6 guys who play in England will not be able to go to Panama. Simply qualifying for the World Cup is not the only consideration here. And that's exactly what I said earlier, right? You don't want to just qualify, you want to do well when you get there. And so anything you can do now to help prepare us to get there is beneficial, right? It's just over a year away. We need to get these guys ready to do well at the World Cup. And so every roster should have that in mind, that we're not just here to qualify. And by the way, qualifying in 3rd place and qualifying for the World Cup is not acceptable, right? There will some people who will try to sell that to you as a success. It is not. Minimum, we should be in the top 2 with strong performances that speak to the team getting better as time goes on, more gelled, more cohesive, good tactical ideas, strong work ethic, all of those things. And we need to be seeing that over time. Because if we don't see improvement, we really haven't seen much improvement in the last, year or so. If we don't see that, then there are concerns. But let's dive into the roster. We're going to start off with Gregg's goalkeepers here. I believe that Gregg will bring 4 goalkeepers. So Matt Turner, Ethan Horvath, Sean Johnson, and Zack Steffen. And the reason I think he brings 4 instead of 3 is because neither Zack Steffen nor Ethan Horvath will be able to travel to Panama, being that they play in England. Now, as I am recording this, Steffen is starting for Wycombe. I thought he was going to be, starting for Manchester City against Wycombe Wanderers. I thought he was injured because he wasn't on the bench for Man City the last few games. It is good to see him back. I don't know how he's going to perform. But either way, I think Gregg will bring 4 so that we can at least bring 2 with us to Panama, Sean Johnson and Matt Turner. And so it'll be interesting to see if he does that. It would be very foolish to not do that. And I'm with Gregg. These are my 4 goalkeepers as well: Turner, Horvath, Johnson, and Steffen. I do think that Gregg sees Steffen as his number 1, and if he's fit, he may start against Jamaica. I would probably go Matt Turner just because he has been reliable, and Steffen is still all over the place, right? Playing occasionally for Manchester City, injury problems, had a rough year before. I still don't think that staying at Manchester City for another year was really good for Zack Steffen, but it is what it is, right? If our number 1 goalkeeper is doing that, then Matt Turner certainly has an opportunity to beat him out. So we will see who Gregg selects. I do think Gregg will start Steffen against Jamaica, and then probably Turner against Panama, and then based on performances decide who starts in the U.S. against Costa Rica. Okay, let's talk about the fullbacks now. So DeAndre Yedlin, Sergino Dest, Antonee Robinson, George Bello, and Joe Scally. These are the fullbacks that I think Gregg brings. 4 of them were the same 4 fullbacks from the September window, and Joe Scally being the addition. He's played almost every game for Mönchengladbach, performed very well for an 18-year-old. My big concern about Joe Scally when he moved from New York to Gladbach was his technique. We saw him in the Under-17 World Cup, and I remember thinking that he was very athletic and a good physical specimen, but that technically he suffered. He seems to have improved on that side of his game a fair bit, and also has really improved his 1v1 defending, which from the perspective of our fullbacks, we don't have a lot of really strong 1v1 defenders. Sure, he's 18 years old, and there's still a lot of things he can continue to work on. His ability in the build-out continues to be something that he can improve on. His 1v1 defending is not perfect, but I do think he's done enough to convince that he should be with this roster, especially because we need depth. Because neither DeAndre Yedlin nor George Bello really convinced from a defensive perspective. Sergino Dest, is always a question mark defensively. I do think that he'll bring Joe Scally, who can also play left back in an emergency as well. My fullbacks are slightly different. I've got all 5 of those, but I've added Kevin Paredes. The reason I've added Kevin Paredes is because he's had a really strong season for DC United, playing in Hernan Losada's 3-4-3 as a left wingback. He is 18 years old, also capable of playing left back, left wing back, or left winger. Probably he can also play as a tucked-in right winger if you asked him to. Very technical kid, quick, good with the ball, excellent with the ball, 1v1, will provide a lot of natural width, and even though he may not play right away, is somebody that I think is worth bringing in now, getting him familiar with the program, getting him familiar with the training sessions, with his teammates. He may be our backup left back for Robinson in Qatar, depending on how George Bello develops. Some other guys who people have questions about, Sam Vines is still injured, probably won't see him until the end of the year. After that, there's Reggie Cannon and Shaquille Moore. Cannon has not played in quite a while, and so there are still question marks about him. I don't know if it's an injury this season, or if he's fallen out of favor at his club. But neither of those guys has really played. Shaquille Moore has played about 15 minutes. I think he got a rest after the Gold Cup, and I just don't think he's in full form and fitness and ready to go. So I would add Joe Scally and Kevin Paredes to this as backups. 6 fullbacks might seem like a lot to some people, but I'm going to err on the side of safety, caution, and also thinking about the future. Remember, there is no limit on how many players you can bring, so I say why not bring them in. Center backs, and I think Gregg will bring John Brooks, Mark McKenzie, Miles Robinson, James Sands, Tim Ream, and Chris Richards. So this is the same center back core that was brought in September, except Chris Richards replaces Walker Zimmerman. The reason I think that is because Walker Zimmerman did not play a single minute in the September window, one of the few players to not play at all, and I think that speaks to how much Gregg really rates him when he has all his full center backs available. There's no reason to not bring Chris Richards. Last time he was working on a move, so I understand it, but he has now played 2 90-minute games for Hoffenheim as a starter, slotted right back in where he left off, very competent on both sides of the ball, really a strong defender that may be a starter for us in Qatar, and so there will be no excuse to not have him in this roster. I don't really rate Tim Ream, but again, I'm talking about what I think Gregg will do, not what I will do. James Sands did have a rough first half against Honduras, but part of that was the role he was being asked to play. And let's face it, nobody on that team played well in the first half. And a lot of that was the roles that they were being asked to play by Gregg. They just didn't suit them. He still is a very competent defender, and he's versatile enough that he can play in a back 4 or he can play in a back 3 as the sort of central defender who steps into midfield. We saw that in the Gold Cup. So I do think that Gregg gives him another chance and brings him into this window. My center backs are slightly different than Gregg's, all the same with the exception of Matt Miazga. Now I have Matt Miazga replacing Tim Ream. I don't rate Tim Ream, guys. I think it's become very clear over time that he's on the decline. And really the only reason that he's continued to be there is to be John Brooks' backup. Well, that's not necessary anymore because Miles Robinson, Chris Richards, and Mark McKenzie can all play left center back if necessary. Tim Ream is slow. We saw in the Nations League, he was targeted frequently, and also he isn't going to be in Qatar. I would rather work with defenders who are going to develop chemistry leading up to Qatar than continue to have a guy who is not going to be there for much longer anyway. There's plenty of experience in this defensive core now. They've all experienced CONCACAF, World Cup qualifying. You really don't need Tim Ream there. Matt Miazga, there are question marks about him too, right? He switches off a lot and makes bad mistakes in games sometimes. His move to Alaves, this is the first time he's playing in a top 5 league in quite a while, and so far has been competent. I don't have a problem with bringing him in and letting him prove to Gregg and to the team that he wants to be part of this team going forward, but he is going to have to work on several aspects of his game. One is mentality, and the other one is reading the game. And third, he also needs to work on his distribution, right? So those are things we want to see from Matt Miazga, but I have him in this roster because I still think he deserves a look. Popping right into midfielders, and this is where Gregg and I really disagree. I think we see Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie, Cristian Roldan, Kellyn Acosta, Sebastian Lletget, and Yunus Musah. So 5 out of these 6 players were here in September. Yunus Musah was just coming back from an injury at the time. I do think that Gregg rates Musah enough to have him in the roster, but I don't know if he's going to start Musah. In Nations League, Musah was healthy and fit and ready to go, and he didn't see a single minute. Gregg at the time said he was not fit or something, but then he played 16 minutes against Costa Rica and looked just fine. Weston McKennie probably should be back here. I disagree with Landon's assessment that this is beyond repair, what he did. But I do think that he's going to have to come back and earn sort of his leadership role again. With strong performances, with an ability to show that that was a one-time mistake and not who he is, this could be a big turning point for Weston, right? Will it break him? Will it crush him? Or will he come back stronger? Will he learn from it? Will he understand that he cannot let the team down like he has done, especially because he's one of the leaders of the team? I think he will. I think that Weston is a strong guy. I think that Weston will be back stronger from this, and I'm looking forward to seeing him. Now, I don't rate a lot of the players in Gregg's midfield here, and I'll talk about that when I talk about my midfield, but this is genuinely who I think Gregg brings. This is my midfield core, and as I've said many times, guys, one of the big weaknesses of this team is creativity. We really lack creativity, and so mine is filled with lots of creative players. I think it actually has a good balance between more defensive players and creative players. Tyler Adams, Weston, McKennie, Luca De La Torre, Sebastian, Lletget, Kellyn, Acosta, Julian Green, and Yunus Musah. Now, some of you might be surprised to see Sebastian Lletget in my midfield. He would not be here if Gio Reyna was healthy. Gio Reyna appears to still be injured. Dortmund made a statement and said that, they hope to have him back by September 25th, but now that may be pushed back. So that's unfortunate for Gio. If he was here, he would be here ahead of Sebastian Lletget. People know I don't rate Sebastian Lletget, but as a 7th midfielder, I'm okay with it. Luca De La Torre, Yunus Musah, and Julian Green are here to provide a creative spark that this team needs. So many of our problems are Cristian Pulisic and Gio Reyna dropping so deep to receive the ball because they don't have a midfield that can feed them. And that is easily remedied by having creative midfielders here. This is what I would do. I would have probably at least one of these three, De La Torre, Musah, or Green, starting next to Weston McKennie if we're going to play a 4-3-3. Kellyn Acosta is here to back up Tyler Adams. Kellyn Acosta kind of reverted to form in the September window. He had a really strong 2 or 3 games in the Gold Cup, and we were getting very excited about, his potential. But like I said at the time, guys, players can play above their level for short periods of time and then usually regress to the mean, which is kind of what we saw from Kellyn in September. He wasn't bad. He's always eager. He's always going to cover a lot of ground, and he's going to do a good job defensively. But there are still a lot of question marks technically in the build-out. Can he really do that job of a 6? He's sort of an emergency option, but not somebody who should be playing as an 8, definitely, because he provides very little from a creative perspective. Time to talk about Gregg's wingers, and we have Cristian Pulisic, Tim Weah, Paul Arriola, Konrad de la Fuente, and Brenden Aaronson. Gregg would have had Gio Reyna here, but with his injury, Paul Arriola will be the 5th winger. It's very interesting. Gregg talked a lot about Paul Arriola and his other favorite boy, Gyasi Zardes, in the September window, as though they were the answer to all of our problems. I thought that was bizarre, but for whatever reason, Gregg really rates Arriola. He will be here. He does bring a lot of CONCACAF experience. That is about all I can say for Paul Arriola. I think he's extremely limited technically, and while a hard worker and probably a good guy, isn't going to offer a lot of a penetrating threat that this team needs. But we all know Gregg Berhalter. Gregg Berhalter is going to stick with his guys regardless of actual performances. And as fans, we just sort of have to live with it. I resent it because I don't think that Paul Arriola offers enough to this team. But the other 4, De La Fuente, Aaronson, Weah, and Pulisic, all deserve their spots here. It'll be interesting to see who starts on that right wing instead of Gio Reyna if Pulisic starts on the left. Aaronson and Weah are both in with shouts, but to be honest, it would not surprise me if Paul Arriola started there. So my wingers are mostly the same, except I have Nicolas Gioacchini there instead of Paul Arriola. Now, Gioacchini just got his move to Montpellier. One of the reasons he wasn't in the September window, had a very good Gold Cup, is extremely effective in the final third. I still maintain that Gioacchini is actually a center forward, but he can play as a winger in an emergency, which is why I have him here. He did get an assist last week for Montpellier in Ligue 1, and I think is still super young, 21 years old. Only has 8 caps. A lot of people don't rate him very highly because he wasn't very productive at Cannes, but every time he's played for the national team, he has been really good. He has 3 goals and 2 assists in 8 caps, and is somebody that I think will only get better, so I really hope we see him in this roster. Let's talk about forwards now, and I think that Gregg brings the same 3 forwards from last time, Sargent, Pepe, and Pefok, and of course adds Gyasi Zardes, his favorite striker. There's not really a whole lot to say about this. There are some other guys that maybe could have been here. Will Jesus Ferreira come? I think maybe he will. It's a possibility because he has been playing well for Dallas. The problem with Jesus Ferreira is that we don't know exactly if he can play as a 9. I don't think he can. And he's not really an 8 either. He's more of a second forward, in my opinion. A guy who, if you're playing a 3-5-2, can sort of play that second striker off your main number 9. So it's possible that he will be in this roster. Gregg does play more of a 3-4-2-1. It's possible that he could play in those roles as well, but I think mostly in a 4-3-3. there isn't room for Jesus Ferreira, so I didn't have him here in the roster. Daryl Dike is another guy that some people have asked about. I don't think that Daryl Dike has done enough recently to convince that he should be in this roster. Is too similar to Jordan Pefok in my opinion, so I don't think we see him. My forwards are slightly different. I bring Josh Sargent, Ricardo Pepi, Matthew Hoppe, and Jordan Pefok. Guys, it is really important that we bring Matthew Hoppe. We still haven't seen him play as a 9 for the US, despite playing there for Schalke and now also for Real Mallorca. He did play 30 minutes last weekend, came on, looked really good with his hold-up play, with his off-ball movement. Technically, he even scored a goal that he was offside, but you could see his ability to finish. I really think we need to give him a run at the 9 at some point in this camp because I think he can definitely compete with Ricardo Pepi for that spot. Sargent and Pefok have not performed well, but they don't have a lot of competition at the moment. I do think Hoppe should be there. He can also play wide if you need him to, although he does not enjoy playing wide. He considers himself a 9. Both clubs he's played for considers him a 9. Christian Pulisic considers him a 9, and I really think it's important that we see him in that role. Remember, apart from being fast and technical, he's also a big guy. He's 6'3", and he can do the dirty work of CONCACAF. That's really important. He's competitive. He wants to win. His gamesmanship is on point, and he's just a guy you really don't want to play against. I think is going to be one of the stars of this team going forward. All right, guys, I've told you what Gregg is going to do, at least what I think he's going to do. I've told you what I'm going to do. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments who you would bring in this roster. Who would you have here? Who would you not have here? I want to hear your thoughts, guys. Don't forget, on Thursday, we are dropping an interview with Herculez Gomez, both at my channel and at Tactical Manager. Really good interview. He had a lot to say about the state of the American soccer landscape. You guys are awesome. Smash that like button again if you haven't. I will talk to you on Sunday.